Today's update introduced a ton of new things to go over, so let's just jump right into it. Torn of the Windweaver is off the ban list. The most obvious application is that some kind of aggro deck may start to run this alongside Dragius, as switching a monster to attack mode and getting to attack twice means you can push for even more damage. Currently, I think Hammer Crush Deal is probably still the best skill for aggro decks, but some players who were still on Legend Draw may end up trying out the Wind Searcher. We should also know that the Tag Duel event starts today, which adds in Rage of the Beast as a new spell card for Rush Duels. This is spell and trap removal for Beast and Beast Warrior decks. But what you might notice is that every single popular deck is running the Beast engine. So say goodbye to Ghost Cyclone and say hello to our new premier spell trap removal effect. With the release of this card, it's entirely possible that players will stop using Hammer Crush Deal and start running this instead. Only time will tell, but I think this card is going to see a ton of play. Some other decks do use Torn of the Windweaver, such as Seven's Axel Road and Disco Fever, but they don't really have anything else competing for the Limit 3 slot, so I'm not sure that it's going to make a difference. They could put in Call the Earthbound, but these skills are restricting all of those other Limit 3 monsters already. So this isn't a huge change, and it's one I welcome. Next up are skill changes. Magician Shuffle gets a wording change that doesn't actually do anything right now. Instead of having no effect monsters with 2500 or more attack, we now can have spellcasters with 2500 attack. This doesn't make a difference as there are no 2500 attack point spellcasters currently in the game, and it doesn't add any new restrictions to cards we can't run. Tempest Drive also gets a small buff where it now provides an additional 200 attack. This doesn't do all too much, but it does mean Bender Break is now at 2500 and can crash with other monsters, and Torn of the Windweaver, if you run it, goes up to 22, allowing it to beat cards like Flame Cerebrus found in the Noodle deck. All-Seeing White Tiger goes from 1700 to 1900, but there isn't anything in that attack range that it really cares about. Worst case scenario, it means that a 1500 attack point monster, backed by the barrier, is still going to trade with you, rather than beating your monster. Next up are card leaks. We know Shield and Sword is coming from the anniversary, but what we didn't know is that Sword and Shield, its complementary trap card, is also going to be making its way into the game. This is an incredible buff to the Yami Ruler deck, as their monsters all have super high defense and will survive any battle. This is way better than a card like the Barrier or Recital, because when a Dragius or a Dragonic Slayer comes on in, you're going to destroy the opponent's boss monster, no matter how much they've buffed the attack. It's also worth noting there is a Urashima the Hermit skill, and it might finally get the chance to do something now that the trap card means it's not a zero attack sitting duck on the opponent's turn. After that, we see leaks for the structure deck. We already knew about Acebreaker and Aim Eagle, but the other new cards are Tough Striker, a 2500 vanilla, Cannon Rhino, a card that allows you to inflict piercing, and 2 new vanillas. So all 6 of the new cards from the structure deck are going to be monsters. That means, unfortunately, the deck is not getting Battle Demotion or Salary Slash, which I was kind of expecting for a defensive trap card for their deck. Overall, I'm not expecting the structure deck to end up being super crazy, but the free Acebreaker and another copy for 500 gems might end up coming in handy for aggro decks later in the future. Now, let's move on to a card I absolutely was not expecting, and that is Barrel Dragon. Barrel Dragon is a 2600 attack point monster. This, on its own, is already relevant, as it means Ancient Arise Dragon is going to crash when Barrel Dragon is backed up by the barrier. And it also means no other monster in the game is able to compete against this without a buff. So something like Seven-Toed Magician or Prima Katarna can still get over Barrel Dragon, but if you want a card like Dragius to do anything, you're going to need to have a card like Speedy Performer or Thunder the Thunder. And when Barrel Dragon can be backed by your own trap cards, it's going to be really difficult for the opponent to cleanly clear this out. I would expect most aggro decks to start running this over Summon Skull, especially since it has a 50% chance of just straight up destroying an opponent's monster, regardless of its attack, regardless of its defense, whether it's face up or face down. Barrel Dragon is able to destroy any monster in the game and potentially open them up for a huge direct attack. Rounding out the leaks are the 2 new cards that we're getting from the Mimi rerun, which we already knew. Shining City Knights is actually pretty strong since it can boost Dragius up to 2700, allowing it to clear other boss monsters with ease. Additionally, Fashion of Faith is support for the Aqua deck. I do expect it to see play in the dedicated pure builds like Disco Fever, but probably not outside of that. It is worth noting that Fashion of Faith requires you to have Dion Keto on the field if you want it to do anything. And you only have 3 of those in the deck, so it's not super likely for you to always have it in hand. The last thing I want to point out is that Sword and Shield and Barrel Dragon are coming in bundles, which means we're not going to get them until we get the next box, which we still don't have a release date for. Hopefully, it comes sooner rather than later.